What's up guys, Nathan here. Today I wanted to do an overview of all 5 Ascendancy teasers we've seen so far leading up to Legion. Actually, yesterday I did an overview of Chieftain and that video was like 27 minutes, I'm not even kidding. I shot it, cut it, and edited the whole thing, and then I was like, well, I should probably just get all the fucking Ascendancies together in one go, so we're just going to do it like this. I'm going to try to knock them out, bam, 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 so you guys don't have to sit for like 4 hours and watch me talk about Ascendancies. And before I jump into it, I should say this video is supposed to get you hyped and get you thinking about the different Ascendancy builds you can do, but for the love of God, please wait for the patch notes, because GGG is known for making last minute changes, and then of course there's going to be a lot of indirect changes that happen that will maybe impact these Ascendancies in ways that will significantly change what you actually want to do, especially as your league starter. And I want to do a quick shout out to JY Shadow on Reddit, because I'm going to be using his sort of difference comparison sheets he has here from the old Ascendancies to the new Ascendancies. So thank you so much, JY Shadow. Appreciate the work you do, and it's going to make my job a hell of a lot easier. First, let's talk about the Chieftain. Right now, Chieftain is in kind of a niche place when it comes to softcore trade leagues, because the survivability isn't 10 out of 10, the damage and speed isn't fantastic either, and you really can't pick up your key nodes until you finish Uber Lab in most cases, unless you're playing a totem build. Now, of course, this changes when we get into SSF and hardcore SSF, as Chieftain does give you a lot of tools that are helpful if you're focusing on survivability or you're limited in your budget. But all of that being said, I want to talk about the new Chieftain, because the new Chieftain basically takes everything that the old Chieftain was good at, and it makes it about 5 times better, in addition to solving some of the problems that Chieftain has traditionally had. So let's just go over the major nodes here that I think are important to touch on. The 2 big ones for me are Tawa Forest's Strength and Velako Storm's Embrace. The Forest Strength node is fantastic because it actually gives Chieftain reliable endurance charge generation. You know, we have Juggernaut, who has to get hit to to generate endurance charges, or you know, we have various other on-kill effects in the game, but this is actually just a true endurance charge generation method. All you need to do is, you know, stand around outside of maybe the Shaper's Realm and mash Molten Shell, and you'll get your endurance charges up, which is fantastic. Then we have Velako's Storm's Embrace, which is just giving you some more synergy with your endurance charges, so you can actually get more damage for spending your endurance charges through something like Immortal Call or Tectonic Slam, or maybe uniques like Duresso's Defiance or the Eternal Apple, as well as +1 to maximum endurance charges. So these 2 nodes right here for me is enough to make Chieftain like a really attractive option if you're going for something that focuses on survivability, or maybe it's just easy to play as a league starter. But then we also have some of the other nodes, like for example, we have Salayo, I think, Cleansing Water, which kind of just got reworked / buffed from the old Ramako Sun's Light. You still get that awesome fire resistance, which is great for SSF and budget builds. You get an additional % of regen, and you also get this cool new mod, which is 50% increased life recovery rate if you've taken fire damage from an enemy hit. This is a massive stat. This multiplies all of your regen, your leech, your life recovery from flasks. It's just a really good defensive node, and I think this kind of puts Chieftain almost on par with Jug in terms of budget, life, righteous fire characters. It might even be better. I don't know. I'm not some righteous fire guru over here, but it is a fantastic node, and I think we're going to see a lot of hardcore and hardcore SSF players just grabbing that as their first lab point and being very happy about that. As far as some of the other nodes here, I think the big ones are, we have Tukohama War's Herald, where we lost Reflect totems and Taunt totems, but in exchange, we got some cool new increased effect buffs of your Ancestral War Chief, Ancestor totems getting bigger activation range, basically just a lot of quality of life stuff to make your totem and Ancestral War Chief builds feel a lot better to play. And then they reworked Ramako's Sun's Light into this sort of generic Ignite, Burning Damage, Fire Penetration node, and this isn't like the worst node in the world, in my opinion, because it lets you play Chieftain in a way that doesn't completely rely on Nagamahu Flames Advance for all of your damage, because you don't have to convert anything. You're just getting that Fire Pen, you're getting that Ignite chance that synergizes with Combustion support, and it's pretty much just a cool tool, and I'm glad Chieftain's getting that. The last thing I want to mention about Chieftain that I think is awesome is Chieftain has always been sort of a slower Ascendancy. You don't have a lot of access to cast speed, attack speed, movement speed, and they've talked about taking slower weapons, like harder hitting slower weapons like maces, and making them more viable via support gems and changes to the base types. And I'm hoping these sweeping changes will sort of act as indirect buffs to Chieftain, maybe giving it a more fun overall play style. And worst case scenario, you could just roll Tectonic Slam Chieftain because this is pretty much Tectonic Slam the Ascendancy as far as I'm concerned. Okay, moving on, we have Gladiator, which is one of my personal favorite ascendancies. Right out of the gate, we can see that Gladiator was kind of nerfed on its minor nodes. It lost 1% increased attack speed on pretty much all of its nodes, but the upside of that is it's now global attack speed. This is not with one-handed weapons, so you can just do like two-handed Gladiator, or really, any other kind of Gladiator that's not going to be relying on being sword and board or dual wielding. Then we got this brand new node here, Arena Challenger. Now this is supposed to interact with the new Blood and Sand stances. Essentially, if you can manipulate your stances properly, flipping over to Blood when you're bossing or killing rares and uniques, and then flipping back over to Sand when you're just clearing normally, you can be granted up to 20% more attack and movement speed through these challenger charges you'll be getting. Now, in case you're wondering, 20% more movement speed is a really cool multiplier that is not easy to come by. The only thing that's even remotely comparable is actually, I think, just Deadeye's Tailwind. I'm sure there's something else in the game that I'm forgetting, but that's like the only thing I can think of off the top of my head. And because this is more attack speed too, this is going to make your shield charges, your leap slams, your whirling blades, those are going to feel so fast and so smooth. So this is a really cool node. The only thing that I'm a little bit iffy on is we don't actually know how these Blood and Sand stances are going to feel, and we don't know what skills are going to specifically interact with them. We know about Blade Storm, and I think we know about Lacerate, but there's going to have to be a little bit more, I think, for me to really want to take this node. Otherwise, it's a little lackluster, and the Gladiator didn't get a lot of changes, but I'm still hopeful, and I'm definitely going to make a Gladiator at some point during this league. And, again, worst case scenario, even if this new Arena Challenger doesn't work out, you can always just be a max block Gladiator, because that is one of those broken defensive mechanics in the game, and Gladiator is really just fantastic pound for pound as a defensive ascendancy. Okay, next up, this is the first real big one, is we have Slayer. I think most people who are looking at the different melee reworks are most excited about Slayer or Berserker, but let's get started here. I think the real theme of the Slayer is that there's so many new nodes and buffed and reworked nodes. There's no clear path. A lot of the time, especially if you're playing something just like Cyclone or something that doesn't need melee splash, you just sort of grab your Overleech and, leech effects are not removed at full life, and then you just go Bane of Legends. I think that was like sort of the classic choice when making a Slayer. But now we have to make these decisions with all of these crazy new nodes, like the new Overwhelm, the new Impact. But first, before I get into the new nodes, I want to talk about the very light nerfs that Slayer saw. And they're not really nerfs, they're just sort of reworks to make room for all of these new tools. It lost Overwhelm, which was ironically a pretty underwhelming node, but that was the node you would take if you wanted to be able to stun more often. I think you could like always stun at full life or something. Anyway, that node wasn't super exciting. I think most people who were playing stun builds would just sort of stack a lot of reduced enemy stun threshold, and they wouldn't worry about Overwhelm at all, even if they were playing Slayer. And then we also lost 100% total recovery per second from Life Leech, which is a stat you would get over here, I think, on what is it, Brutal Fervor? Yeah, Brutal Fervor. And this was a cool stat because it let you, without a lot of damage and a lot of attack speed, sort of get to your leech cap a little bit faster. But Brutal Fervor got a bunch of new stuff, and then honestly, in the absolute endgame, when you're dealing a shit ton of damage, you're not going to notice this stat because it's all about hitting that leech cap. And if you can deal enough damage as quickly as possible, you're still going to hit that leech cap without any investment in this increased total recovery per second from Life Leech stat. And then the last thing Slayer lost was that free melee splash node, which was kind of cool because it was definitely bigger than the support gem, but at the same time, an Ascendancy node should probably give you something a little bit more unique and interesting than something that you could just pick up as another support gem. So I'm glad that's going away, mainly because it's getting replaced by some really cool quality of life stuff that I'm about to get to. So the first brand new node that I think everybody is talking about is Overwhelm. Basically, this reads, base critical strike chance for attacks with weapons is 8%. There's a couple other stats here about getting an additional crit multiplier per nearby enemy, as well as reducing the critical multiplier of enemies, so it does give you a little bit of extra side damage and then a little bit of survivability, but it's all about that base critical strike chance. Most weapons in the game that aren't balanced around being crit weapons have 5% base crit. So we can take weapons like Starforges, we can take things like disfavors. I think somebody was talking about a dream feather now that we're not tied to two-handed weapons when we're playing Slayer. And you can make those weapons have 8% base crit. So bam, you take a weapon that's balanced around not critting very often, and then suddenly you can just slap a diamond flask on it, invest a little bit into crit on your tree, and you're going to just be doing a shit ton of damage. It's hard to compare this to the other big damage nodes like Brutal Fervor and Headsman, but it's a unique way to get a lot of crit in an Ascendancy that typically is not even remotely interested in crit. I think most Slayers that aren't really focusing on damage, they want to deal with the survivability, would just sort of go Resolute Technique and forget about the whole chance of critting. But Overwhelm is pretty damn cool. That's a really awesome node. Somebody's gonna have to crunch the numbers on just how much damage that is, but it's definitely unique and enables a lot of new crit two-handed builds that people probably were never going to consider before this patch. And then I talked about Brutal Fervor for a little bit. We lost the Life Leech stat, but we did get a lot more damage. We get this 50% increased attack damage and 15% increased attack speed while leeching, as well as 6% reduced damage taken while leeching. These are just really cool quality of life damage and survivability stats, and I like them a lot because it means for your first two labs you can actually just go Endless Hunger into Brutal Further. And I really like this because for your first two labs you can just go Endless Hunger into Brutal Fervor, and that's fantastic. It means you're actually going to get some damage returns for going this kind of just overly defensive route on your Ascendancy choices. Oh yeah, and I guess Endless Hunger now gets Cannot Stun. That used to be in the old Overwhelm, so now you're actually going to be stun immune if you're not playing Cyclone, which you would be stun immune anyway, but now you can be stun immune when you're not doing that. And then the last really big, really exciting brand new node for me is Impact. This is, in my mind, sort of the quality of life melee node. If you're playing like a single target melee skill like your Heavy Strike or your Double Strike, this is 50% increased global accuracy, +2 to melee weapon and unarmed attack range, also huge for Cyclone, Sweep, probably Blade Storm. And then 5% increased area effect per enemy killed recently, up to 15%, and then, or up to 50%, sorry, and then deal up to 15% more melee damage to enemies based on proximity. So just the quality of life node for people that are playing melee splash, ancestral call, single target skills like Double Strike, Heavy Strike, that sort of thing. It's hard to say how good this node will be because, you know, they've touted how effective the melee reworks have to making melee feel good, but if this was like a pre 3.7 node, I would see this as a fantastic way to just make any single target melee skill feel really damn good to play. And last but not least, we have Masterful Form. Weird ass node, gives you a bunch of charge duration and then sets your maximum endurance charges to be equal to your maximum frenzy charges. I don't really know what to make of this node. I mean, I guess if you're doing some kind of like Flicker Strike character and then you have a way to generate endurance charges just as readily as you have to generate your frenzy charges, it could be a nice chunk of survivability. But the thing that's really like kind of shitty about this node is there's so much other cool stuff in Slayer right now. I find it hard to really even want to consider masterful form. That being said, I'm almost certain somebody is there already thinking of some crazy build that I can't think of and is going to find a way to use this node to great effect. So all in all, Slayer got a bunch of crazy new tools, a lot of damage, survivability. It's just a very balanced, versatile Ascendancy with so many different options, and I'm really excited to see how people are going to build this Ascendancy. Okay, and the second big one we have is Berserker. I gotta say, Berserker just got buffed out the ass. There are a couple of mechanical changes and some new stuff being put in here, but more than anything, I feel like this is just Berserker turned up to like fucking 11 basically. It did receive a couple of very specific nerfs. I don't really think they're intentional nerfs. Again, with Slayer, I think it's just making room for the new stuff. But to be specific, we have Warbringer, which is the Warcry node that people use, especially with Ancestral Warchief builds, and that's not going to generate rage for you anymore, which is, I guess, unfortunate for the people that really enjoyed doing that. And then Pain Reaver had, I actually don't even know if it was called Pain Reaver, but the one that just gives you life and mana leech, that one had kind of a weird niche effect where if you took a savage hit you would leech 100% of the damage you deal. So that was just like a global leech mechanic, which, you know, is kind of cool, but people who want to use a global leech mechanic, they'd much rather get that from something more reliable like a Warlord's Mark, not having to get slapped for, what is it, like 15% of your max life or something before you can actually start leeching like you want to. Okay, enough with the nerfs. let's move on here and take a look at the buffs and changes we got. Okay, so the first one here is Flawless Savagery, and this one gives you 80% increased critical strike chance for attacks, adds 20 to 30 fizz damage to attack if you've dealt a critical strike recently, and 30% crit multi. This is, you know, for any crit build, these are nice stats. I mean, they're not game breaking. If you have a very fast weapon and you don't deal a lot of damage, the flat fizz is really nice, but more than anything, this is just sort of a quality of life node that's going to give you a lot of damage if you're a crit build. And then things start to get interesting with Blitz. Blitz is a node that comes after Flawless Savagery, and it grants you 20% more attack speed per Blitz charge, 10% reduced critical strike chance per Blitz charge, gain a Blitz charge on critical strike, and then plus 20 to maximum Blitz charges. This is a lot of attack speed, in case you're curious. Basically, this is just a lot of damage. You might need to build a little bit of crit to make sure you can consistently gain these Blitz charges, but I think all it is, based on the minor nodes that come before, this is still a reasonable amount of crit. You should still be able to build them up slowly but surely as you're mapping. But yeah, once you get rolling, this is what I mean. 2% 20, that's 40% more attack speed. I can't help but wonder, like, if this is going to get to a point where your mana leech, you know, your 0.4% mana leech that sustains builds like this is like not going to keep up if you like start investing in mana gain on hit just to fucking play with shit like this. But yeah, this is just massive damage. This Flawless Savagery, 2 nodes, gives you a fuck ton of damage, and you know, gives you a reasonable amount of crit stats as well. Then we got Warbringer, nothing exciting here, just a little bit of attack speed and damage if you decide to Warcry, probably not a very attractive option. Then we have Pain Reaver over here. I think this one's kind of cool. Maybe not worth taking, I don't know, but at least it's free leech, 2% of attack damage leeches life and mana, and then you get this 25% increased attack speed if you've been hit recently, so you get hit and then you get a little bit more attack speed so you can start building your leech stacks up again, and then 50% increased maximum total recovery per second from life leech if you've taken a savage hit recently. I know leech is complicated, but basically this is increasing your leech cap for, you know, the next 4 seconds after you take a savage hit, which you don't have overleech or anything, or slayer leech, whatever it's called, so this is probably a deceptively weak stat, but it's still helpful. I mean, you get slapped and then hopefully you don't get stunned because of Rite of Ruin, and then you just keep hitting and then your health will shoot back up. So you might be able to couple this with Volpact to get some pretty cool you know, basically life recovery rate with the help of this stat. Okay, now for more new nodes, we have Crave the Slaughter. This is basically Rage, back at it again, but you're also going to be getting 1% chance to deal damage per 4 Rage. Oh, and also there's a cap at how fast you can gain Rage, so you have to be, yeah, you're only going to gain, you know, 3 Rage every second, basically. But once you do get your Rage up and going, you get those same benefits from Rage. Increased attack damage per 1 Rage, you get increased attack speed per 2 Rage, and then increased movement speed for 5 Rage. These are significant buffs. Rage was already pretty good in terms of the bonuses it gave you, but now you don't lose health or anything, so that's pretty cool. Now we have Rite of Ruin back at it again, and Rite of Ruin here gives you this insane buff of effects from Rage are tripled. This is funny because I actually proposed these changes at one point on Reddit and I was shot down. Specifically, I said effects from Rage are quadrupled, which, you know, might have been a little overkill, but this is cool because you don't have any negative effects tied to Rage here. So you're going to be tripling all these positive effects. That means 150% attack damage. Wait, math is hard. This means 150% attack damage, 75% increased attack speed, which seems a little bit high, but I mean, that's the math, I think. And then 30% increased movement speed if you take this Rite of Ruin node. You're also going to be losing 0.1% of your maximum life per second per Rage. The way this is worded, it makes me think that effect itself is not going to be tripled. So if you're only losing 5% of your max life per second in exchange for all these amazing benefits, as well as stun immunity, this is a good node. This is actually worth building around. It makes me want to League Star. I love that 30% movement speed. That alone for me is appealing for the Berserker, because I love the idea of going fast, hitting fast, and Berserker just sort of checks all those boxes while also giving you just metric fuck tons of damage, which in turn opens you up to build survivability on other parts of your build. So these changes have kind of cemented Berserker as this just massive damage, absurd amount of attack speed. Ascendancy, I'm not going to lie, I was hoping for something a little bit more nuanced and, I don't know, unique. But the damage is here. I mean, it's a lot of damage, and attack speed is cool because you can do life gain on hit, and then of course your leech rate is going to get going really fast. So I mean, it's not a bad Ascendancy. I'm sure it's fantastic. I'm sure a lot of people are going to play it to great effect. It's just not exactly what I wanted. Oh, and one thing to add here is I think they were talking about different kinds of external rage generation, like different skills that actually utilize rage differently. And then apparently the Berserker is also going to be able to consume rage in a different way that's also going to be based on skills. This is all stuff that I sort of almost think I vaguely remember from an episode of Bay Class, or maybe it's just teasers from the trailer, because you can see these buttons that nobody recognizes, and then Berserker presses them and then his rage starts going down. So I don't know exactly how those kind of changes are going to indirectly affect Berserker, but it's still something to keep your eye on, and that could totally, give me a reassessment of how I feel about this Ascendancy right now. Okay, and last but not least, we have Champion. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I can't believe I actually waited all day for this goddamn tiny-ass reveal. Even gave Mathel a chance to beat me to this freaking overview of Ascendancy video, I guess, according to my YouTube subscriber feed. But yeah, it's here, so let's talk about it. We got a couple of quality of life changes. First to strike, last to fall, which was the permanent intimidate hit on full life, which is the main reason why people took it, as well as, of course, the adrenaline effect, which I think was initially coined by our friend Mathel back in Bestiary when he made the Mathel Pog Champion, where he would do blood magic, I think, with like Curse Flat Blasphemy or something. Anyway, all you got here is now you'll recover 25% of your maximum life when you do hit that low life threshold of 35% of your max life. This is more of just a quality of life thing if you do end up using this node to be almost defensive, as I think it was originally designed to be. You'll just sort of get a nice burst of healing, so maybe you won't get 2-shot or 3-shot like you might have otherwise, because that extra 25% can mean a lot when you're actually fortified and kind of beefed up like a champion usually is. And then Inspirational got a slight quality of life buff / change. I've actually never used this node, so I don't know how big of a deal this is, but instead of gaining 20% of your stages when you create a banner, you'll be gaining 40%, so I guess that's just objectively better. And then you're going to be getting a regen effect when you place those banners rather than a flat recovery effect. So I guess maybe the original design of this node was that you would place it and then you would give a big old surge of life recovery to your allies. Instead, it's more about you place the node and then you provide this relatively consistent regen effect for its duration, which I guess is a nice buff if anybody in this world actually wants to take this node. And I do want to add one more thing about Champion. They have talked about and teased, and Chris has mentioned that they're reworking the Fortify support gem to actually have a significant damage multiplier on it. So I think Jonathan or maybe Chris are quoted at saying that you actually are going to be auto-including Fortify in your 6-link. So as far as I'm concerned, that's basically an indirect buff, because you're going to be getting these awesome attack speed, evasion, attack damage, and cannot be stunned bonuses that you normally would have had to just work a little bit more for, but now it's just right there for you. All in all, Champion is still good, one of the most balanced, in my opinion, and well-designed Ascendancies in the game. It's just not, as sexy or as exciting as I think some people were hoping. I probably won't league start on it as it, just because I think it's more interesting for you guys if I can make a guide for you about something you've never seen before, because very likely if I league start as this, it's just going to be some slightly fun new skill and then just same good old Champion you guys are very much used to. That's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching. If you guys have any suggestions or ideas, or maybe think I missed something, feel free to leave a comment below, and I'd love to hear what you guys have to think. And you should be looking forward to my League Starter video, because I'm going to be making my official League Starter video as quickly as possible after the patch notes comes out, as well as working on my experimental League Starter list, because oh boy are there a hell of a lot of experimental ideas that are going to be coming out of these patch notes that are not going to be tried and tested, but are going to be really cool and highly recommended to play around with. Anyway, this has been Nathan. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you!
Hey guys, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters, Real Human, Pete, Zikarak, Squally, Zoljan, Coda, Julia, Alan, Keplerk, Fusk, Putzak, Oro Ori, and the new member Heiser808. Or maybe not so new, but he's been a part of the Discord for a while, and he recently helped me procure some Adobe Premiere software in a way that saved me a good amount of money. So thank you so much, Max. Really, what you did means a lot to me, and I'm more than happy to include you on this end screen. If you guys are interested in joining the Patreon team, you can check me out at patreon.com/NathanBrotherBob, on Instagram at NathanWalkerYT, or you can join my Discord, which is spelled out there. I'm not going to try to say it because I'm 110% sure I'll mess up. Anyway, thanks again for hanging around, and I'll see you guys very soon.